So we have ahead our kind of final thrust of the conversation. Obviously, we'd love to have some synthesis and summary kind of happening if we can. And what I have in the program, in my notes, are really, I think, two major things with some sub-questions. So what I think we're going to start with is a conversation around density and sense of place. And also, so when we talk about density and sense of place, I would love to understand more of all your views, and we were talking about this outside, about the relationship of population density, and its impact on questions of democratic structure, right, or democratic action. Also then how at every scale of settlement, how does the scale of settlement help foster and reinforce a sense of citizenship? So there might be interesting inverses that we find in that. And then I think our wrap-up conversation is really trying to reflect a little bit further. We started talking about urban form. Ettore gave us a very beautiful description of thinking about urban form in all sorts of different environments and cultural contexts. So reflecting on urban form and democratic culture, again, individual to communal, the relationship of the suburb to the city, like the center and the edge, and sometimes the sprawling, the duality of centralization versus polycentric, and then the value of centralization, decentralization. And I think that'll bring us to a conclusion. So very excited to get into this and hear different views. So let's start by thinking about population density. I would like to talk about first. And I'll give you some thoughts. These are not fully formed theories, but I definitely have a view that we can have something that we call critical mass in terms of population numbers and population density. And when we achieve critical mass, certain things start to work that may not work below that mass. So what do I mean by that? I'm thinking that means the acceptance of diversity, the vibrancy of the public realm, the opportunity for economic activity, literally through just supply and demand kind of numbers, the possibility of safety through eyes in the street and people's presence in the public realm. So for example, if you're in an urban place, and this is what happened in many American cities, if you have an urban space that has very low population, especially in the American city, it was on the weekends or after 5 o'clock when workers went home, you may have had like a city center where literally there was just a few people wandering the streets. And one can imagine that at night, it would be a very dangerous place to be because you would have no natural protection through other people around you. And in fact, the one time in my life I've been assaulted, my brother and I, was in downtown Pittsburgh where I grew up, right, where there was no residential population. Comparatively, now I live in a city of 8.5 million people. I have lived there for almost 25 years, or actually 25 years now this month. And now I actually live in a neighborhood which is the densest neighborhood of the United States in terms of population density. And it's among the safest per capita places in the United States. Safest, even though the rhetoric you might hear from the government pretends it's the opposite, but it's like the chance of being, a victim of crime in New York City is much smaller than it's almost like 100th, I think, on the list of cities of 300,000 population or more. New York is 100th on the list in terms of the ratio of crime per capita. So what is your sense from all of our lived experience, from all of our professional experience of this relation? Is there something that can be said about critical mass of population density, like urban form that generates population density and leverages it to achieve, vibrancy and economic viability and so forth.
So I think one of the greatest problems of the urbanism of the 20th century, the post-war development of cities, it was an intentional confusion made between the meaning of population density and the living density. Because living density is a problem, because when you have a space that is not dimensioned to whom such a number of people, the quality of the air is no longer healthy. So you can have problems, illness, epidemics, which was what we were talking about this morning, the great achievement of the etiology that demonstrated that. But this has nothing to do with the population density, because if that would have been a problem, we would never had any kind of historic centers where you have an incredible density of population. If you analyze the cubic meter per square meters of the historical center of Rome, it is insane, but it's very healthy. It's very pleasant, it's very vibrant, it's very vital, which means that, first of all, it's necessary to clean up any doubts and say that population density is not a problem. The overpopulation density could be a problem, but the overpopulation density is something that is related with the high rises, more than buildings up to 6 stories, 7 stories, because then it's also necessary to understand what are the problem of mobility into buildings and what could be the proper dimension to be given to buildings within an urban settlement. So this is something that, in my opinion, it's clarified by the analysis of any kind of historical centers that shows not only some population density, but shows a wonderful example of mix of function and mix of income.
Right.
Because if you go to Palermo, for instance, the historical center of Palermo is a place where very rich people are living next to very poor people. And at the end, where are the places of the crimes? The places of the crimes are the suburbia, which I like to define criminogenic, because designing non-spaces, because it was very well defined, the non-spaces, it's these agglomeration of buildings without any shape, without any form, without anything that is developing the sense of belonging, is completely creating depressive condition in people, which are generating other side effects. Obviously, if then you have clusters of super poor people that they need to survive, it's like when you made the experiment of making mice all in the box, and at the end, at a certain point, they start fighting one each other until the stronger is winning. That is something, this analysis made with animals sometimes are clarifying dynamics that are affecting any kind of animals, including the human. So this is absolutely important to be taken in consideration. Then, what is the extent of an urban settlement? As we said, it has been well identified by Gustavo Giovannoni 100 years ago, and later on, more recently, by Leon Krier in this kind of 10-minute walk city. Obviously, it is something that has to take in consideration the habits of the 21st century, which are no longer those of the 16th century. Unfortunately, or fortunately, we are using cars. We can't imagine a place where cars are disappearing. That is the ideal place, but is also a dream that is sometimes ridiculous to think about, because unfortunately, cars are necessary. We are traveling, we like to travel, so a family needs to have a car. But there is also the example of Venice, where the cars are not existing, but there are the boats. But cars are parked in Tronchetto. So when someone has to leave Venice, goes to Tronchetto, recover the car and goes whatever, it is necessary. So it's necessary to think about all the possible categories, and it's necessary to defend any kind of categories. It's necessary to understand, since I quoted Venice, how we can organize a space that at the end is respecting the needs of different people. How Venice is a perfect example where it's possible to see how every building is served on one side from vehicular circulation with the boat, and on the other side the pedestrian circulation. So studying carefully the network of connections, studying carefully the vehicular circulation and the pedestrian circulation, and understanding that the pedestrian circulation is the place where we are supposed to have the most important spaces. Having a piazza where you have a high traffic is a nonsense. The piazza has to be protected. Having shops in a secondary alley, it doesn't work in terms of real estate, but shops are perfect in the streets where you're supposed to have the stroll. Those things are all, and many others, are part of the way of designing spaces and defining spaces, defining settlement according to the different needs, according to different places on this planet. And then, at that point, it's necessary to understand what could be the density, how many people we need. To me, what is important analyzing the historical cities is to understand how these wise people were protecting the countryside from the expansion of the city, because low density has a lot of problems. Because low density, it has been demonstrated by the Congress on social housing held in London in 1909, so more than 100 years ago. It was understood that the problem of housing was limited, was blocked, was not possible to be solved because of the value of land, the market of land. The cost of land is immense. So imagine a garden city for social housing. It's just ridiculous, because you will never recover the immense cost of the infrastructure you need to invest to create a city that is livable. And then you have to imagine the cost of maintenance of these things. Cost of maintenance means who's pruning the trees, who's maintaining the streets, the sidewalk, the piazza, the fountain, the aqueduct, the electric line, the telephone line, etc., etc., etc. These are immense costs which are paid with our taxes. So this means that we need to think at a society that is living in dense spaces. Dense that must be, in any case, not overcrowded. Because if it is, this is something overcrowded in a society that is also depending on car, unfortunately, because every family has a car. Obviously, you need to have immense parking lots like Dallas, for instance, like Houston. So this idea that growing vertically that reduces the land is a big lie, because then you need immense surfaces for streets and immense surfaces for parking. It's necessary to consider what is manageable. And we can see cities that, could be even large cities. It's not probably 13,000 or 10,000 inhabitants. A historical city, were also a city of 60,000 of inhabitants. Depends on the way you are making the city. The village could be 1,000 of inhabitants, but a city, to be defined a city, is a very large settlement. It could be even larger, but it has to be organized in a polycentric way, where different municipalities are autonomous and can manage properly their costs. Because, we can imagine today to destroy New York and widespread people in the middle of nowhere. That's a community, but it has to be organized in a different, let's say, sub-cities, depending on the central one, in order to be manageable. And obviously, we need to consider that cities cannot be only made of buildings, but must be a place where you can have a healthy conditions that are including vegetation. Having a city with the streets that are larger than what are necessary, and then these streets are narrow with the trees, creating an idea of pseudo boulevard, where trees are suffering because the roots are not breathing properly because of the streets. It's ridiculous. It's better to recompact the urban fabric and have edges, boundaries, a ring, park, that are defining the edges of one district and the other one, and the green is shared, and the green is really behaving as vegetation, as a nature, instead of being a ridiculous tree on the asphalt of some street. When this is clear, the number of inhabitants, it's something that is the very last thing to be taken in consideration if the space is designed taking inspiration from models that are possible to be analyzed and being demonstrated working. One more time, the historical center of Rome is extremely dense, but it's extremely livable. Even if the vegetation is in Villa Borghese or in Villa Pamphili or in Villa Celimontana, which is not that big. But in any case, you have a proper vegetation, you have a proper amount of building, you have a proper amount of spaces for gathering people.
Other thoughts on population density? We were just chatting about the kind of, so like when I say critical mass, obviously it's almost like to a village. I studied in London graduate school, and I saw many amazing small-scale English towns and villages, and urban form-wise, amazing, right? Like how they would cluster around the high street or make that market square by just almost like bending out and bending back. But we know that so there's no doubt, even at the smallest scale, the hamlet, the village, the small town, they can be conceived of as a built environment with strong characteristics, a sense of place, where you're being compact so that you're preserving as much of the outdoor, of the natural landscape as possible. But obviously, say in small town America is one place, and I'm sure in many places in the world, when you lose population, then say the high street dies because there's just not enough economic activity, there are not enough.
But that is also a consequence of the policy that has been made in the 20th century,
right,
of building the shopping malls.
Yes.
That used to, because now they are killed by Amazon. Right. The shopping malls kills the retail.
Right.
And when you no longer have retail and you no longer have the shops to survive, people are forced to leave, and then you have the desert. The city that has been deserted because of wrong policies. This is happening even in many parts of Venice. It is happening in Florence. It is happening in Rome. It is happening in every place that is attracting tourism, and there are policies that are made on purpose to move out people. Now it's not much the creation of shopping malls, which unfortunately are happening,
yes,
but is the substitution of shops to survive with shops where you can buy touristic stuff, souvenir.
Tchotchkes, we say in New York.
Nice. So that's important. But the sides, independently from the height and the number of people, as we understood, thanks to Giovannoni and later on thanks to Leon Krier, is this 10-minute walk. Because everybody, even some person with a problem of mobility, needs to reach walking everything, which is adjacent to another one, If you go to Montepulciano, there are two villages that were fused within one. If you go to Siena, over the 3 hills of Siena, you have the 3 settlements that were fused within one. So they are still recognizable as entities, but they are also belonging to something larger. And this is something is the dynamic that is possible to be found in any village, even in those you are mentioning in England, where instead of having the network of street, they have the main street and the market piazza. The size, the dimension is always based on that, because when we used to use our legs, because today we ended up the morning talking about the Wally, when we use our legs, everything was possible to be reached walking. And this is healthy, because this is another problem of our society that is not taken in a correct consideration. The amount of pathology related with sedentarism, with obesity. We have a problem of blood circulation. We have a problem of obesity. We have a problem of diabetes, etc., which are problems that were not existing. I remember when I was a child, it was almost impossible. I have no memory of anyone that was heavier than what was the right weight for a person, either a child or an elder person. They were all slim.
Right.
At a certain point, we changed the way of eating, we changed the way of moving, and a lot of problems arrived. Is it enough to understand that we need to change our habits?
Yeah. I surmise that there are some people, maybe here in Germany as well, but definitely I think in the US, that never walk up a stair in their daily life. Houses are designed to be one story. You get in your car out of your one-story house. You drive to a place of business that's designed to be one story. You go to a store that's one story, and you literally never encounter a stair in that daily life, which it's almost like Wall-E like that. If you never need to lift your leg up to walk up a stair, that's a level of mobility you're already like down from that, even if you walk horizontally, right? So, I think, so the economics, right, as we see for everything we've talked about this afternoon, there are all these layers that need to come together, this intersection of an economic recognition. If you want to have, a vibrant place, you need to have, you need to be able to concentrate, the exchange of goods through retail that actually provides what people need, like grocery stores and, post offices and banks and clothing stores or whatever it might be. And so the distortion of the physical urban form is combined with these extreme concepts of retail, services, that now that drones are going to be dropping things onto our terrace or onto our front door, which is already being experimented, with and promoted in some places. And these, so that economic, the drivers of that economic system are obviously having this impact as well on our ability to, say, maintain a community in a smaller scale, right? Again, I'm fortunate to, say, have 6 grocery stores of all good quality within walking distance, within 5 minutes walking distance of where I live. But if I go to Washington, it's interesting to compare critical mass of population density. Let's take New York and Washington, D.C. as 2 examples. Washington, D.C. has a average population density of about, I think, 45 people per acre compared to New York, where it's over 100. What does that mean? That means, and also a transportation system that's much less dense and connective. So grocery stores are much fewer and farther between in Washington, D.C. than New York. And to walk to a grocery store, most people might not even be able to walk within 10 minutes to a grocery store, which means the grocery stores are developed with car parking, as a major component. So that's kind of shocking to me to go from one New York's neighborhood where I have abundance, and I go to DC where I really have to think carefully about how I'm going to go buy some groceries. And that's driven by population density. Like, that's true density in that case. That's the direct
we have the situation here in Germany. It's island in the city. Let's say 40,000. Okay, and it's a green city. It has a park through the middle. It has a shopping area. It has all the shopping stores. But the majority of people drive 2 blocks to go to the grocery store, or go 2 blocks to go to the coffee shop to have a coffee with something. They don't walk. They all drive, just 2 blocks. And the main reason is to show off that they have a Porsche, a Mercedes, a Ferrari, or so forth. They want to show everybody what they've got. And instead of just parking it and walking and having a conversation, it all becomes a status thing to drive the car down the street. It has nothing to do even with the consumer ability.
Right. Yeah. Well, that's a distortion. Yeah.
Well, maybe most cities in Germany won't have the Porsche, Lamborghini, and so on problem. But I guess there's the ideology of avoidance of effort.
Right.
People just are too lazy, speaking frankly, just to walk some meters by foot. And that leads to the situation that even if there are parking lots within some 50 or 100 or 200 meters away from the store which you want to reach, people prefer parking on pavements just opposite the store because they just want to go in for some 10 minutes to buy something, quote. So that's a problem of behavior as well in our cities. I'm not quite sure how to educate people except for having more police on the street who just charging the wrong parked cars on the pavements. And that's something that spreads, and it spreads especially in small to medium-sized towns, because people there are used to drive everywhere. In huge cities or in bigger cities, it's obvious that you can't drive in the pedestrian zone. So, of course, you take a walk or you drive for bus or tram or something else. But even in the small cities, in the villages, they do every meter by car. And that's what we provided for as well as society. We provided for parking lots in front of every store. And I guess that was a mistake. It was mistaken planning, because what we did in effect was we just gave up public space. We gave up space for some banks sitting there to have some time to drink the coffee out on the pavement in any circumstance. But we just gave up that for parking lots. And I guess that's one of the major problems we face. And I'm very happy that there's cities who really do something in opposition of that. For example, in Paris or in Paris, as you pronounce it, they really strive for improving the situation. But I guess that will be taking decades until that trickles down to the smaller cities and villages, especially in Germany, because we're addicted to the car to an extent that's not imaginable.
And I think we can tie it to the population density, urban form, and sense of place. And this relates to something Ettore said yesterday, which is when you're walking your students on these different walking tours. And in so literally some environments, you almost don't even recognize the effort you're making to just be on foot and walking. Other environments, all of a sudden you're hyper conscious of it. And so some of this is like as I remarked about taking a run out of town this morning here, I ran down a sequence of streets that had sense of place. And as I do that, I'm almost like, it's almost remarkable to me. I thought that would take me 10 minutes, and it felt like nothing, because I just was always the visual interest, the sense of place. But as soon as if you're walking or you're going for a run, all of a sudden you hit a condition where there are no buildings around you, you feel the immense distance of the landscape, right? So we are impacted psychologically by the sense of place, and that will certainly impact our behavior.
And there are spaces that are inviting to the stroll, really genetically, and spaces where the walk is so ugly that people takes a car to go 1 block away. That's why the design of the city, the shaping of the city, the form of the city is crucial to change the habits, because really, if I would be in a district that is made of single family houses, I would have any interest in walking if I don't have shops that are necessary to survive, and I also inviting people just for curiosity to see what is there. There is no reason to walk, which is what I said yesterday, is the experience I do with my students when we analyze 4 different kind of districts of Rome, because everybody believes that Rome is marvelous. So we always say that is the most beautiful city ever. But Rome, beautiful Rome, is only the historical part and the first expansion of that beautiful part. All the rest is, a city that is without any character. And this is something that is not pleasant. It's not a place where you can find someone walking, but not like those that are walking into the city. But since it was open, this discussion on the retail and the desertification, etc., it is important. I don't know what is happening in Germany. I don't know what is happening in the US. But in Italy, even if unfortunately it's not happening, almost not happening anymore, when we make a master plan, a master plan obviously is always updated. And the master plan is not made only by the regulation of cubic meters possible to be built and function to be built. There are many different kinds of master plan. There is the master plan for the expansion, the construction. There is the piano di recupero or piano particolareggiato, which is the one that we do to recover, to restore. But among all these master plan, it must be also one that is called piano del commercio, is the master plan for regulating the commerce, that says that according to the number of inhabitants, you need to have not more than, let's say, 2 pharmacies every, I don't know how many inhabitants, 5 grocery shops, etc., etc. And these are rules that must be respected, because if there is a law, I can change the function. I can allow the disappearing of shops that are there because of the respect of the law, because of the respect of the minimum standard according to the number of people. So the shortcuts that sometimes are taken without respecting the master plan, it's something that is unacceptable. Now in Rome there is a big debate because of obviously the long term. You need to design and approve and implement a master plan. It's something that takes many years because you have to pass through different levels of control. And this is something that makes people not happy, but mainly make the speculators, we call palazzinari, unhappy. So they prefer to take a shortcut and make a proposal to change something without changing the entire program, changing the entire plan. This is something that is unacceptable, because if you have to change something, you can't approach the problem locally, because this little spot could be horribly powerful in the vision of the entire city. And so it's unacceptable, this idea of working locally, making adjustment, because these adjustments are just damages. Recently, yesterday, we had this discussion also with Dennis talking about the disappearing of parking lots. I'd like to have cars disappearing, as for instance, I've seen in Galicia, in Pontevedra, where you don't see the car. It's an 85,000 city, 1,000 of inhabitants city, but the cars are disappearing. There is a local traffic, low speed traffic, 10 kilometers per hour, and then they have to disappear in underground parking, etc. But the problem is there are laws And until those laws are not changed, we need to respect these rules. And if until we don't want to evict people from houses, because this is a trick that has been recently used in Rome to move out inhabitants that are living in part of the city, which are much more profitable from external entrepreneur to make B&B, Airbnb, and all these touristic structure that are killing the real life of places. If you are living in a place where you don't have underground parking lots and were designed because you can dig, because there are archaeological finds, all these things which at the end is not bringing anywhere. But if there are minimum surfaces for parking, you can't eliminate this thing. And if you don't have the proper system of public transportation, you can eliminate that parking lot to create some biking path that many times has no beginning, no end, because this is the way we are proceeding, analyzing locally the program. We can do, today we do the bike paths for via whatever. And this is something that has no beginning or end, because I can imagine that a bike can, until we don't have ET, the extra, that is landing with this bike and takes these bike paths from here to there and then disappear. I need to have a bike path that is capillary and is working in the entire city, because I want to promote a city that is biking accessible. So what we have is the disappearing of parking lots, because we have this new biking path, many of which nobody is using, many of which has been demolished a few months after the construction because they realized the terrible problem they caused to the public transportation system. So wasting money for nothing, it's something that makes people mad. And it's something that is a nonsense, and it's something that is also limiting the accessibility, is limiting the livability of a place, because if I have the needs of car, problem of mobility, and I pay taxes to have that, you can't eliminate that before finding an alternative, because I need first to have the alternative. It's like what we were saying this morning. I can't demolish the monster Corviale building before having the new houses where I can move these people away of a few meters, because I can disrupt their life. So we all believe, we all dream for a place that is more livable, more biking, more walkable. But if we don't approach the problem at the right scale, we risk to cause problems.
Guess he didn't expect not to raise any contradiction to what you said about parking in the city. So I just got a slightly different perspective on this, as we discussed earlier. Well, because what's in fact what we do have, apart from, well, let's don't leave apart all the alternatives to private car ownership. We got sharing economy. There's work models that work quite good. We got public transport. We got we mentioned it before several times, the 10-minute city, which would be the ideal. So you wouldn't need a car within a 10-minute city at all, and even not if you live in your area. You can go barefoot. You don't even need to use the bike. But what's the effect of having cars in our streets? Well, to be honest, no city on the world ever built a road to park a car on it. We build roads to drive on it, the cars. But having the car is a private problem. So maybe you should solve the problem where it belongs to, the private sphere. If you have a car, you have to take care for a parking lot for your car. You would surely not accept if just I came along with my bicycle and put it on a parking lot for a car. But why do you expect the community paying for you the cost of
I consider this a misunderstanding. I suppose there is a misunderstanding.
No, just let me finish, because that's just a little provocation, of course.
No, I'm glad. So I'm glad of that.
You notice yourself, obviously. What's the point I want to get to is, I had the experience during many years of being active as a council member in the city and as a mayor, that we're used to the concept of having the car, and the concept of having the car as close to us at our disposal just as we want it. We do reject to walk to the car for even 2 minutes because it has to be there in a Sattler, out of the door into the car. And I guess that's a part of the problem, because it's, again, a kind of to try to avoid any effort even in reaching our own car. And we should talk about this. What's the effort that's acceptable to reach a parking lot, to reach a parking garage with several levels? So that's all things that can very easily be done, even in our densely built cities, because the spaces are there. Because if you add all the places of the car standing on the free air, that's a number. That's the numbers higher than the space you need for real apartments. So I just want to get away from that focus on car. And I know the Italians love cars. We love cars in Germany as well.
Honestly, we don't. But I love my car as well. Well, I'd like to forget my car. The problem is not the community is paying for the car, because the community already paid for the parking. Because if you go to the historical centers, not only the center of Rome, the parking is almost entirely forbidden. The passage of cars is almost entirely forbidden. It is permitted only for a few hours, only for those with a special permit to do it. Okay? What is my argument is that in a city that has been designed for cars, because this is the way the zoned cities have been designed. It has been decided, starting from 1967 in Italy, with a specific decree of the states, that according to the cubic meters you are building, you pay for the creation of such a number of square meter according to the cubic meters, according to the function. If these are shops, if these are houses, etc., etc., there is a percentage of surface that has to be made for parking, because in addition to the private parking that are mandatory in a modern district to be in the basement level, every building has a basement level for parking there. Because there are shops, because there are guests, etc., etc., it's necessary to have some surface that is in the street that are designed for cars. It was mandatory to design also the parking, because that was something that was making the life in this district possible according to these to the legislators. So we paid, whoever built paid, whoever is buying a house is paying also because of this. If I change something in my home, if I change, if I create from one apartment because it's now too large, 2 apartments, I have to pay a specific tax to create a parking according to the upgrade number of houses. So if this is what the legislator has decided to create some life in a city, not the historical part, but the modern part, that require these things, I can't eliminate something for which we paid only because there is this idea of spending money for something that nobody's using. As I said, I love to bike, so I'm not opposed to biking. I'm opposed to projects that are made only to spend money without having some vision that is considering, first of all, the continuity of these paths in order to be capillary and in order to create a society that is much more biking. Obviously, at time, the biking paths are also causing problem to the sidewalk, and people with a disability are penalized because some biking path is blocking the accessibility, because sometimes these designs are not made by people with expertise of the subject. It's really sometimes something just to spend the public money because are available. As I said, one biking path under a tunnel where nobody wants to walk. Even when you drive, you close the windows. They made 2 lanes on 2 opposite directions for biking, reducing the size where cars and public transportation were passing. And then they were forced to cancel one of these biking paths just finished. They maintain the other that nobody uses, because obviously nobody wants to take this underground passage breathing, because when you make exercise, your lungs are working more.
Yeah.
And so you absorb all the pollution that is produced. So how one can imagine to do something like that?
But there's another scale, right? Like in the United States, we have about 8 parking spots per car across the country.
Yeah. And I guess maybe there are some different, let's say, legal preconditions, because obviously in Germany you do not pay community for creating a broader street in front of your house just in order to having the parking lot there. So maybe there's some legal differences between the 2 countries. But what's happened is, in fact, the community pays for broad roads, for broad streets, just in order to allow people to park their cars. And these costs obviously are enormous to society. It's some 3,000 euros for the side of a car park that could have been spent otherwise. And we do not, in comparison, spend the same amount on people who do it drive by bicycle. And there are other problems that will be quite differing in the future as it comes to electric vehicles, which do not pollute the air anymore. So that will shiver, of course. But my point is, we should treat equal things equal. And if we accept there's a diversity of mobility aspects in our society, and people using that different, we should think what is the appropriate share of resources that go in each of the possibilities. And many streets and roads we built not recently when we just developed that spirit of driving more bicycle, but they were developed in the 80s, the 70s, and the 60s, even before. And back then, the architects who planned that didn't have in mind that every family had 2 or 3 cars. So then, of course, the number of parking lots that would have fitted to the need. But today, that has changed. And I really wonder whether if they knew how the private possession of cars would develop, would they have decided to allow parking on the road? I'm not quite sure about this, because that's one major problem in our cities at the moment, that there's a struggle for parking lots. And to be honest, I got a friend who is an architect who lives in Karlsruhe, who does not use his car for one reason, and that reason is not to lose the parking lot in front of his house. And not so he's got only that. No, sorry, no, of course not. But that's that irony to highest level. I've got a car just to keep it parked in front of my house, and just to
I don't want to give up that
outside. It's very, very funny.
Okay. It's the aspect of being mobile as a value in life, in modern life, as associated with this ideal of the free moving individual. If you go away from cars, and if you see the aspect of mobility in broader terms, as just being mobile, as with or without car, making journeys, and so on and so on. And a community needs, in order to be a community, needs some physical residence. No? What happened if many people
of a community are not present for larger parts of the year. One aspect. The second aspect of mobility, what's about the so-called modern nomadism? I am not also as a working individual. The extreme case are these digital nomads. I'm not confined to a place in my work. I can travel around, which means I have not to adopt and not to stay at a specific community. It's a kind of Airbnb lifestyle. So I can be here for 3 weeks and then 4 weeks in Singapore and so on and so on. There is no sense of place except for a quasi-touristic thrill. So this is a nice place, have-to-see place, the place A. 3 weeks later, I leave to place B. A nice place, a thrill place, etc. When community needs time to develop, what's about the relation between individual mobility and community? The cars included, but it's far beyond cars. It's a lifestyle and the mindset. Traditional communities were on one place, more or less, until the 19th century.
Yeah.
They were on one place. I have to adopt to my neighbors. I have to adopt with my local people around me. I have to come to terms with them. I'm forced to. When I'm moving around all the time, I don't need it.
Yeah, I've lived since my childhood. I've lived without a car. Never owned one in my life. And I did that by living in London, living in Rome, living in New York, living in Washington, D.C. At the scale, the first scale of mobility is, on foot, in a wheelchair, in a stroller, right, if you're young. And, a good city needs to pay close, like we talked about, paying attention to all levels of stratum of society, all categories, as Ettore has said many times, which includes the elderly, includes the infant, includes, people of all levels of ability to move on their own. If you have, the mechanisms of public transit, of the bus, the subway, the tram, those are critical to a sense of community and a sense of place. If I walk to the subway station in New York City, I expect that I'm leaving my 6-story apartment building. I'm leaving my block where I recognize a lot of the people, and now I'm seeing a larger segment of my neighborhood population. The physical proximity that you literally have on a sidewalk or in a public transportation mode puts me I might be in quite physical contact with my strangers, whether I like it or not, on a crowded subway. So I think and now I'm traveling a few times a week between 2 cities, and I literally am getting to know the names and faces of all the people that I see regularly on that commuting distance, right? The people that work in the train, the people that work in the stations, the other people that are commuting like me. So these are radiating community, contacts, or little circles of human contact that are, critical to my sense of place or my sense of connection.
That's a good point. I would make a distinction. We addressed this point already yesterday. It makes a sense of place,
Mm-hmm.
but this is not a sense of community. I know the people when I'm riding the Amtrak train to my job during the week. This is okay. And I feel safe when I enter the bus. I'm sure that the bus will arrive and I will not drop. Okay. And I like this local surroundings when I'm driving with my bus to my workplace. This might create a sense of place, but it does not create a sense of community, and it does not create a sense of identity. If we say, this was our assumption yesterday, that in the end, a sense of identity needs a sense of community. In the end, it's all political.
Heavy psychological level to all that, but I really do. Because, for instance, I think that, look, I take trains here to Karlsruhe from Baden-Baden, for instance. Yeah? And when I get on the train in Baden-Baden, some days I see the same people, some days I don't. I'm open, I'll talk to people and, have a conversation. It doesn't have to be about anything. And then, like, for instance, one day I was talking and there was a woman and she was like a younger woman, attractive, and we talked to each other. And then she was telling me she goes to Mainz because she works in business twice a day on the train. So, we exchanged cards and didn't see her again. Then she called me one day, and now, once every month in Baden-Baden, I meet her with her dog, and we take a walk through the park and have a coffee together. So basically, I've expanded my relationship, my community, because we were in the same community, but we'd never seen each other. But by traveling and meeting people, we didn't. Now, a lot of people are not open, and I think there's a definite psychological level within people of the sort of the fear. If I talk to the person next to me, am I going out of my comfort zone? And I think what we've done in community and society and with collective consciousness, if I can go that far, which is a favorite topic of mine, is that we've lost the ability to sort of give people the desire to communicate with other people, because why should I take myself out of my comfort zone of being me and be interrupted in my comfort zone by somebody else? And I think when you're talking about, it's the same when you're walking across park, and you talked about this yesterday. When you walk across a park and you see a woman with her baby in the crib, and she's got the dog attached to the crib, but she's there on her cell phone walking across the park. And if you say hello, just walking by, they don't even know you're there. They're in their own zone. So basically what you have is this psychological inability for people to enjoy the moment and be open enough to allow themselves to have a collective consciousness with other people, to expand their own community, to expand their neighborhood, as you said, to expand the people in their own neighborhood, because they're too involved in what they feel is their comfort zone, their pseudo-self, for instance, if we can use that term. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Since we are talking about mobility and circulation, and you are talking about the train, in a society, in a community where public transportation are working, where you can have a tram line that is working, bus lines that are working, you can really forget the existence of car. And you can use the car only when you want to travel somewhere else, which is my dreaming place, honestly, because it has been estimated, now I don't remember the correct numbers, but I think the inhabitants in Rome are losing 12 hours or more a month trapped in a traffic jam. I think it's more, but I don't remember the correct number. This is something that is really unpleasant. And obviously, when you can use the tram line, you can use the bus line, if they are working, which means people are not getting mad. Because sometimes there are people mad on the public transportation because it doesn't work, and at the end they want to fight with each other. But when you have some ideal condition, I think you can familiarize with those people. And this is a nice way, is another kind of hub where you can have a social relationship. Because at the end you can talk. There are a lot of elder in the buses that wants to talk. It's probably, there is some old lady in the condo where I'm living that now she is living with her sister, and her sister now has Alzheimer, and so they have someone that is taking care about her. The the custodian of the condo died last year, and this was the only contact she had. So sometime we stop with me and my wife, we give her a talk. But when she doesn't know what to do, in order to have some social life, she goes to the bus station. It's a small, it's just a bench because it's not the main station. And just to talk with somebody, not to go too far from her house. So the needs of social exchanges is fundamentally important. And public transportation is helping much more, if it works, than biking. Because it's a place where you can move and you can also talk. And it's also very democratic because a public transportation that works is accessible for disabled on wheelchair, is accessible for a family with a stroller, with a baby, etc. So it's a wonderful thing. But at this point, it's necessary to consider the border of our discussion. Are we talking about existing cities? Are we talking about future city? Are we talking about a regeneration of existing wrong cities? Probably the problem is always the same, which goes back to the way of designing the public spaces, defining the edges, defining the vehicular circulation, defining the biking circulation, defining the pedestrian circulation. And in this way, making something that is satisfying the needs of any category. Because when you have a conflict, maybe it's a weird example, but I always say to the students when we make a project, since, as I said this morning, I ask the student not only to draw the facade of a building because I don't care, honestly. That is the very last thing I have to take care in the respect of places, but I need to have something that is working in any aspect. I need to have a perfect apartment. So if I'm designing an apartment, or perfect shop or whatever it is, but I need to have a perfect city. I need to have a perfect neighborhood. So I impose them to design the diagrams, and I forbid them to make diagrams that are giving too much information because that is making confusion. If I have a diagram for circulation, I know I can use two different colors, but I prefer to have a diagram that is showing only the vehicular circulation, a diagram that is showing only the pedestrian circulation, a diagram that is showing only the traffic circulation. Then I can also overlap. That is like res publica, res economica, and civitas. But I need to extract the very problem and understand if it works. If I approach the problem of public transportation, of the biking, without considering the other, I risk to make exactly the mistake of making a diagram that is overlapping things without thinking if they work on each other. So it's very important to define case by case all the possible problems in order to find the correct solution. If I have a problem on my heart, I'm not going to the dentist, right? So I need to talk with the expertise to understand exactly how I can solve that problem. And a city is an organism because we are talking about the community, but city is an organism. It is a body where you have the circulation, you have the artery and the veins, you have cars and people walking, and they can't interfere. If the blood of artery goes inside the one of the veins, I think some problem is happening to humans. And if city is an organism, it has to approach with the right respect to avoid to cause side effects.